Our next panel discussion on corporate partnerships will feature a rich array of both industry and legal experts. My pleasure to introduce Dinesh Mewani and the entire panel.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. And I will take 1 minute to introduce the panel, which is going to be by way of saying those of you who have been participating in the conference to date have surely gotten comfortable with the application and the website. And you can see beside their names the fine organizations that they represent. Got ExxonMobil, Kimberly-Clark, BP. You have legal by way of Mintz and Lowenstein represented. And given the clock is ticking, rather than talk about the accomplishments that you've surely already read, we're going to dive right into our session. So I am proud to be on this virtual stage with this group today. We've got the task of sharing with you our experiences and insight with respect to partnerships, strategic partnership, corporate partnerships, different ways of saying the same thing. You have spent some time learning about VC financings. You've talked about non-dilutive funding in terms of grants. This is another angle that startups often can look to, both in terms of funding, but also in terms of growth, in terms of how the company presents itself within an industry, partnering with those that are considered very reputable in the space. And to that end, that's my high-level opening on it, but let's dive into it deeper with the experts. I will first turn to Dr. Cynthia Pierre and ask you a very simple question, maybe with not a simple answer. But Cynthia, what does it mean to you when somebody says strategic partnership? What is a strategic partnership?
That's a good question, because it can take on many different forms. One of the simplest form can be sponsored research, which I think we're all accustomed to. We may pay for postdoc or graduate students and sponsor some research topic that is of interest to us as a corporation and to your research group. We could also potentially collaborate together, whereas we could potentially pay you to evaluate something that we're interested in, that's of mutual interest. And there could be different forms in which that takes, where there could be a payment or shared IP to where we're developing something that seems to be mutually beneficial for both of us. Or we could even have our venturing firm actually invest in you to where we would invest a small amount or even potentially buy out a company if it's a synergistic match for us in our strategy.
Thank you, Cynthia. So Rossi, again, I'm going to jump back and forth between us on the legal side and the industry experts. You know, if you go back a decade, do you think you would have heard a company or a representative for a company like BP saying, hey, we've got a venture arm that will invest in you. You could do research for us. We could come help you grow today. And I know, Cynthia, you also said, oh, maybe we'll buy you. But Rossi, how do you think things have changed over the last decade in this space?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that everyone should be aware of, regardless of what area they're in, is that a lot of companies, I mean, we have three here, but I can throw out Estee Lauder now has a venture arm, cosmetic company. Aflac, insurance company, has a venture arm. You know, I think the tech firms, you know, the HPs of the world, the Microsofts, the Googles, they led in that. But now many corporations have realized that, you know, in terms of their ability to create ideas, sometimes it's better done in partnership with folks on the outside if you're a large corporation. And so everyone who's in an area should think about the corporations that actually may have an interest in their area, and they may find one of the partnerships that Cynthia mentioned all the way up to a venture arm.
I think that's right. Ken, let me ask you very briefly for your views on this. Have you seen change in that space in terms of how, in your experience, corporations and startups have partnered, you know, again, last 5-10 years?
Absolutely. It's been quite a sea change as people have recognized that there's a lot of talent that's happening outside of corporate boardrooms or corporations that people are finding new ways to come up with new technologies, new inventions, new services, and that innovation, that there's a new way to bring that innovation in through venture arms that we can stand up and frankly be able to engage and find new ways to engage with them and be able to bring that technology in house. So it was refreshing when I saw ExxonMobil stand up its venture and scouting group and seeing some of the technology that we bring in and discuss around the corporation.
Robert, let me come to you with a slightly different question. We're hearing from Cynthia and Ken that corporate partnerships can take a myriad of roles. It can be research, it could be, some sort of a joint venture to look into a new area. It could be small funding to full-blown venture funding from a different wing of the company. How do startups get into your crosshairs in the first place? What do they do to get your attention?
Yes, Dinesh, there are many ways to do that. And you're right, to get our attention is step one of building a strong relationship. So you have to make yourself discoverable. I have an example in the recent past where doing a search on a topic that we had interest in yielded a partner that we ended up consummating a very significant relationship with. So you have to make yourself discoverable.
Cynthia, what are tips you would give to those that are in attendance in terms of how do they find the right person at BP? How do they get in your inbox so that that their company is actually doing something that might be very relevant to something that's of interest to your organization?
I would say participation or continued participation in professional organizations, professional societies is one way. Participating in those conferences. LinkedIn is also a very good tool that you can use to find people of interest. I'll give a very short story. I had a recent job posting where someone was able from the external identify me as the hiring manager just through searching the name of my team on LinkedIn and get me in touch with the person that was interested in applying. So it's a very powerful tool to be able to find people because it's quite descriptive. People are putting lots of definition there. But I would say have some type of marketing plan for your company that allows you to remain intact within the industry. So where there's consortiums, partnering with different individuals to form those and bringing different collaborators in. I've seen that done where, a small startup wasn't identified, but another large company brought that startup into the consortium. So ways in which that you have a vehicle to be known to the industry. And I would just say a lot of the industry forums are one you would want to make sure that you're actively engaged in because you'll find our employees there.
Dinesh, let me volunteer another way that I think could be really helpful for folks.
100%.
A lot of corporations, and certainly ExxonMobil has quite a strong interest in getting diversity, a diverse set of suppliers. And so we're always looking for those diverse suppliers. And the way we find them, instead of trying to figure them out ourselves, we're looking at already existing diverse supplier networks that are out there. So to the extent that you can register with those diverse supplier networks, register with the Small Business Administration, those are places we look because when we put out our corporate reports talking about how we're doing as a community partner, this is one of the metrics, one of the major metrics where we try to excel.
Thank you, Ken. Rossi, let me ask you I love it. Fire away. It's like we practice this.
Well, I was going to pile on because we're talking to academics, right? So it's one thing they do very well. They research.
Research, exactly.
And so this is the same situation here. They should do their research. And one of the key things is to know which companies are actually doing things that cross over what you're doing, right? They're interested in what you're doing. That's a research project. And then like Cynthia talked, and then find the appropriate person. That's a research project as well. So this group of people who are tuned into this, they're actually well suited for this part of the journey.
They're doing their research, absolutely. Kenneth, let me come back to you there with a slightly different question. So, you know, we talked about getting attention of a big company in some ways to do it. Can you help share your thoughts on when is the right time to do this?
So it's a great question. It's a bit of always, and I'd say you start early and you keep going through what I would say is an arc of a relationship, and hopefully the last arc of that relationship is very long. And you think of that engagement, or I'd ask you to think of that engagement very strategically. So not a shotgun, let me just go talk to everybody and hope I get a hit, but specifically think of the titles of the people that you're talking to and what's in it for them in terms of that relationship. So as you're talking to your technical person, they are very much interested in getting a business problem solved or a technical problem solved. As you talk to the business person, they want to know how they're going to make money out of whatever you're coming up with. And if you talk to procurement, they want to make sure you have good terms that are favorable for the corporation or are stable. And meet their key metrics that they have to go follow. So as you think of those types of conversations and type of people that you want to talk to, you might say, I want to talk very early to that technical person. So I am, you know, now that I have an idea, let me start to form that idea into a solution that meets a potential need. And you're looking for them to be a partner and giving you advice and figuring out where you can go, such that when you get ready to talk to the business person, they can see the value and how you're going to create long-term accretive value growth for their corporation. And then when you get to the procurement, then those two will then, once they realize they really want you, they'll help smooth over the discussions with the procurement people and drag them along to make sure that you get in.
That's fantastic. The idea that a corporation actually has different touch points and those touch points are not all activated at the same time, and you need to be strategic and thoughtful about when you reach out where, I think is definitely worth remembering for anyone that's thinking about that type of relationship.
Yeah, and Dinesh, just to pile on, when it comes to those conversations, one of the things I see often being a stumbling block is transparency in the IP, sharing the details. And a lot of companies don't want to receive confidential information. So how do you have a conversation that gives enough detail, but still allows you to protect your IP? With the lawyers in the room, we all know that's a delicate dance.
Well, good. We do have a lawyer that isn't a moderator, so he has the job of actually answering the hard question that I can now push to him. Rossi, what do you tell your clients who have been able to, convert that meeting at an event to a follow-on coffee where they're going to get a chance to start talking to somebody like Ken or Robert or Cynthia? And now they're saying to you, hey, this is everything that I've been working on that I'm going to go file. I'm hoping to file a patent on, and I'm taking it all to my meeting. How do you guide them through that process?
Yeah, I mean, that's the first, you actually kind of a couple different things, right? Let's separate what you're doing into two categories. One, the stuff that you might have a desire to protect, IP. So that could be whether trademark, copyrights, or patents. And then there's the other set of stuff, which we'll call trade secrets, right? And I typically tell people to, first of all, be careful who you're talking to about what until you get, if it's something that you want to protect with a patent or a trademark, et cetera, without getting too much into detail about first use and state rights and stuff like that. You probably should think about doing that before you start going out talking to a lot of people about it. And so your first stop probably should be your lawyer to start that process before you talk to the Ken, Cynthia's, Roberts of the world. So then you can freely talk about it because you know it's already protected. If it's a trade secret, something that trade secrets are stuff that are basically protected not by filing with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, but because it's just a secret that you want to get out, like remarkably like the formula for Coca-Cola, right? Then you really can't talk about it, right? And so you've got to figure out a way to describe what you're doing without talking about your secret sauce. And so those are the two categories. So I would actually not go to a company if I had something I was trying to trademark, patent, or copyright until I started that process. I mean, I know you deal with this too. I'm actually punting back to the moderator, but like, you know, yeah, I mean.
No, it's true. And I like to think about it from the standpoint of, what does your website say about what you do? There's not going to be your secret sauce on your website. It's going to be a very high.
Hopefully.
Yeah, fair point. Hopefully. It should be a very high generic description of what you do. And the person you're meeting with in this first session doesn't need to know the intricacies of how you are accomplishing what it is you say you are accomplishing. And that can be the subject of a further conversation after non-disclosure agreements, et cetera, are in place. So I do think it's nice to know or to practice, frankly, a description of your business that at a high level explains what you're doing, and to be able to go through that conversation without revealing exactly how you do it, again, to the extent that it's the subject of trade secret, and not if you have a patent, in which case you can say, this is what we do, we have a patent, you know, you can go look at it, because the risk of the risk of loss of that concept or idea is supposedly minimized to none because it's protected.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to pile on to that, remember, we're academics, right? So we publish articles. There's
Right.
information about our invention that we publish, whether it's an article or a conference paper. So there's some level of detail that's out there that you can use as part of your communication. Maybe you don't want to get to the same level of detail as Dinesh was mentioning, putting your business case together, but that's something that you can use as background material to help people understand that you're serious about this and that there's real technical merit to where you're going.
Absolutely.
The other thing that's really, real quick, everyone thinks that they're the only ones that have an idea. And there's only so many ideas in the world. So the issue often is not whether or not talking about the idea is really very safe, because a lot of people probably have the idea. You know what the issue is with the company? Can you execute on the idea? And does your plan for execution actually work? And so when you're kind of nervous about talking about your idea, chances are other people are talking about it already. So I would go ahead and move forward past that. Your secret sauce is always going to be your ability to execute. And like, you know, you may have a better algorithm, you may have a better formula, or, you know, that's your secret sauce. It's not the idea.
Cynthia, let me come to you with a slightly modified version of the question of, you know, when is a good time to approach a corporation with your company or your idea, given you're the startup. Let's assume someone is approaching you. How impactful is it? And again, we're speaking to an audience that's highly academic, so this might land this might be the proverbial, you know, preaching to the choir. But I still find it surprising when I see prospective these sort of prospective meetings being set up where the entire focus is on the startup and not on the company they're actually going to be speaking to. How does it impact your meeting when someone gets to that stage, gets to your, you know, to that Zoom meeting or coffee shop or, you know, session in your office? And how do you grade that when they give you a phenomenal presentation on what their company does versus a presentation on what their company does and how the two companies can, you know, develop or coexist or grow together?
That's a good question. The first scenario where they just give a presentation on their own company, without indicating anything aligned with our company, that tells me that they haven't really done their research. You don't take someone like that seriously, because then I have to do a lot of digging and probing to understand why I should be interested. Versus if the prospective company tells me why I should be interested, because they've already researched my company, they already understand our strategy, they understand where this fits within our value chain that we participate in, how we can make money. Someone mentioned that before. That takes the meeting to another level, because then that also, I'm not doing the basic of trying to fit it in. They've done that for me. I'm now thinking ahead to things that aren't likely publicly known, that we could potentially have a much deeper and richer conversation.
Yeah, and I would love to get, Robert, your view on this as well. I suppose what I'm asking is, how do you maximize the value of that meeting once you have worked hard to establish it?
Yeah, I think we have to balance two dynamics. One is showing a certain level of proficiency for what it is you're shopping around, but also showing that you're looking for input, looking for people to help enrich whatever your kernel of an idea might be. So I think a lot of corporates will find that an attractive exchange where it's catalyzed by what the enterprise might get from the startup, but also the startup is seeking to understand what's the sweet spot for the industry partner. So if you don't know, at least going with the mindset that I'm here to discover how to make my proposition work for you.
Ken, what do you think?
So
what are the best meetings you've had? And you know what? You strike me like the kind of person that's probably had some bad meetings too. So maybe an anecdote on what not to do would be good.
So it's interesting because I think I've seen it from both sides. So my last job were in licensing, so I was trying to partner with other people in ExxonMobil's technology, and the worst meetings we had were those meetings where, Dinesh, as you were saying, we were only talking about what we had to do and we weren't listening. I think going in with the mindset of being willing to listen and learn and engage, and talk about what it is that they need, understand what they need, understand their business. And part of that's being really clear on what you want to get out of a meeting before you step in the room. That potential partner needs to know this is what they want to talk about. This is where we want to go. So they're able to bring in the right people to the conversation to help enrich the conversation. They need to have a sense of, why does this fit? Why does it work for me? And just a level of humility. It's a weird mix of both confidence and humility that you have to be able to bring to a meeting like this, where what you have, that your secret sauce, as Rossi put it, is great. But you also know that you don't understand maybe the industry as deeply as they do, or how that secret sauce gets applied in their function. And this is your chance to figure out how to turn a meeting into a marriage.
I will take a moment to highlight here the reason we're focusing on this particular topic. When you form a company, it's about establishing that company in terms of what the founders are going to look like, what the responsibilities are going to be, and what's the space that you're looking to better or tackle, right? What are you disrupting, as you often hear in the startup space? Then you get to grants. And there's a lot of paper where you write a lot of great things about the team and about the company. Then you get your angel rounds and your VC rounds, and it's more of the same. Why should we invest in you? Why should we put our money and faith in this company when there are other entrepreneurs and other startups in the market looking to do similar things for the most part? And that pitch that gets practiced over and over again and gets fine-tuned and gets ingrained, and what you see when you're watching Shark Tank and what you see when you're trying to apply for an accelerator is always about, this is the company and this is why you should give us your money, until you get into this room. So it's worth noting that this isn't an error, so to speak, to walk into a room and say, oh, I've practiced this for 1.5 years now. This is what I've done. It got me investments. It got me other things. this is not the same situation anymore. This is a we conversation, not an I conversation. And I think that's worthy of identifying when you're bringing on a corporate partner, or when you're hoping, I should say, for a corporate partner to bring you on. This is something you have to think through. It's no longer, okay, we're great. It's, we're pretty good. We could be great with your help, and here's why. Because if I understand what you're looking for, we can help you accomplish that. Rossi, what do you think? Am I way off? Am I on mark? Help me fine tune that thought from the legal side for the startups in the room.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, so a lot of academics may have their own singular idea. At some point in time, you're going to bring on other founders if it's actually a company you're monetizing. So you're bringing on partners, right? Those are people. If you look at approaching a corporation, you know, in the legal world, we actually refer to corporations as persons, right? Right. And so it's the same thing. You're actually partnering with this entity as opposed to this individual. And so the same issues apply. You should be looking for the same issues. With other people, you're just looking for their money, and they're somewhat passive. They want you to hit milestones, etc. It's a much more involved relationship with an entity that you're partnering with. And so much like if I brought on, if me and Kenneth were going to start a company, that's going to be a much more involved. And we're going to need to know a little bit more things about each other, right? That say that, you know, no, I'm not just going to get $1. We're actually going to be doing this for a while. So are we aligned? Is there enough synergies here? Is there mission alignment? Do we work the same way? You know, those are the things that you should be looking for, I think, as an entrepreneur dealing with the company. The company is definitely looking for those things from you. Can you execute? Is it a match in some ways culturally to where this is going to be something that isn't going to create some friction, you know, 6 months down the road because you're going to go rogue on me, right? Like those are things that you should be looking the same way. Are they going to try to pull me a direction I'm not really trying to have my company going to? You know, and we're going to, you know, do they really want something that's really a side project for me, not really what I want to be doing? And they're going to basically detract me from what I'm really trying to do with this project. That's what it's when you say partnership, almost even better to think about them as another person who's coming in that you're going to be working with for a while.
I agree with all of that. Robert, anything to add on this topic of
I think
how do they prepare to wow you and not, you know, have you forget 20 minutes after the meeting about said meeting?
well, it's back to, I would just be reiterating what we all said, but the ego is a strong thing, and most of us like to teach and show our wisdom. So if you're in a room where you don't get a chance to do that, you probably leave it not feeling as fulfilled. So companies like to be able to impart wisdom to the companies that they're talking to.
And that's a great point. You know, that's when you take some notes and you follow up in 3 weeks with an update that shows you were listening and you did take into account some of the thoughts that are generated in these rooms, because that happens all the time. Hey, have you considered X? Have you thought about Y?
Right.
I have not thought about Y. Let me take my pen and mark that down. And then what a great way to send Robert an email 2 weeks later saying, thank you for raising that. I have looked into that question now, and it seems inapplicable to our fact pattern. Mm-hmm. Or, yes, it does have merit, and I've revised, you know, the 1 or 2 pager that I brought to take it into account.
Yeah,
either
it's
way,
an automatic ticket to a second conversation.
Exactly. And, you know, and that it's almost like you zoom out to the most simplistic of systems that are deployed across any industry, and it's touch points, it's top of mind, and that gives you the opportunity to once again find the top of Robert's inbox. And you know he's paying attention because it was his own thought that you're responding to. So that's always helpful. I'm looking at the clock here. It's 2 Eastern. We have a Q&A session that we will kick off at 2:15, which will last for about 10 minutes. So that gives us 15 minutes. And we've talked a lot about strategic and these sorts of, corporate partnerships. We've talked about how do you get there, and we'll dive more into that. I want to turn the heat up a little bit here, and I want to make sure we have ample time to talk through this. There aren't many panels that the five of us do that look like this. There aren't a lot of startups that look like this. And the statistics in terms of funding, in terms be that startup, be it VC, be it corporate partnerships, what we're talking about now, show that it is more challenging for women and people of color to see success. I'm leaving that very broad purposefully because I'd love to hear from each of you. I think you'd be optimistic to think any of us will come out with the quote unquote solution here, because I think we're all working towards it and it's going to require a lot of effort. But I'd like to hear from you in terms of your own personal experiences, because you have been in industry for a while now, judging from the years of graduation that you've kindly provided in your names. What was the room like when you went through this journey? And, what are you seeing today?
I'm going to start off the panel.
Please.
I'm going to say something. First of all, we were all child geniuses, so we graduated at 5 years old. And so it's not what our age, it's our indicated by graduation year.
Says the one guy who didn't put his year of graduation.
But the other thing I'm going to say before everyone else jumps in is you bringing it up is the first thing. And I said this when we were talking. I said, I used to run hurdles when I was back in the days when I could run a little faster. And one of the big things about hurdles is knowing where they are. And so just mentioning it for everybody who's involved in this journey, you need to understand that there are going to be those hurdles. And you're going to need to jump them and get better at jumping them. And in some cases, you may be the first person who's ever jumped it. Even though it's 2021, you may be the first person still. And you've got to just decide, when I'm going to embark on this journey, there are going to be some times where I'm going to be first. And there's no one I'm going to be able to ask for, how did you do it? Because actually, I'm the one that's doing it for the first time. And one of the greatest things you want as academics sometimes is discover something big. Well, guess what? If you go on this journey, there's going to be some opportunities to discover some big things, because there's not a lot of people who've done it, and however you're doing it is going to be brand new.
Who would like to go next? I'd really love to hear from all of our panelists on this topic.
I can share. So oftentimes when we talk about startups within the technology space, people refer to, which academic institution or family that they're a part of. And that in and of itself gives some level of credence. So whether or not we should take that conversation, have that initial conversation or not. So understanding that already puts the demographics of the people who are at this conference at a disadvantage, because we know the number of us who actually complete these degrees in these fields. So again, that importance of remaining active within the industrial community or the academic community through conferences and professional societies is really important to make those connections and get your name out there. I would say something that I think people are a lot more open to these days are cold calling. And as you're forming these startups, you can have an advisory board, you can have an advisory council, and people like being invited to things or being singled out to give their advice or their counsel to help you to enter into these corporate relationships. I can tell you corporations make time for employees to do that, especially to meet aims that Ken talked about, like increasing our diversity within our supplier network. That's also a big initiative here at BP. So just thinking creatively in ways in which you can get a foot in the door, not necessarily just that company, but hey, that person might know someone who could be, a better person for you to have a different conversation. So finding ways to create those networks that you might not necessarily be a part of already, I would say is something that could make a difference.
Yeah, let me piggyback on that, Cynthia. I think you hit on a key point, which is put yourself out there, most of us who major in engineering, sciences, or academia, selling our ideas isn't the thing we majored in. So you have to realize at some point, if people don't know what I'm doing, if I can't entice people to want to know more, then I'm wasting my time. So how do you get out there and get people in a place where they're willing to listen to what you have to say? And the cold call, the just show up, or go to the places. These days there are lots of people saying things, and sort of get them to get their actions to match the words.
And I'll pile on because I think I agree with absolutely everything said. Be shameless about some of it, right? Don't feel ashamed to say, oh, okay, I shouldn't use Nesby as a way of doing this because somebody will feel bad, or I shouldn't use SWE, or I shouldn't use some other network that may exist. Use it, absolutely use it. Go after it. For sure, the majority is doing the same thing. They're using absolutely every lever available to them to go find and build these relationships. I was talking with a colleague yesterday, and we were talking about how as we hire people from academia, we typically go back to the professor families that we had been at before. Frankly, that's a beneficial avenue, right? So if you know somebody who's working in the industry in a similar technology, and they graduated out of the same lab, give them a call. They'd be more than happy to be, like Cynthia said, an advisor on your board of advisors, because frankly, it gives them a chance to get back in and feel like a grad student again, and get in there solving problems. As Robert says, it just gives people a lot of satisfaction to know that they're able to solve problems. And we're largely around other people who frankly like to achieve, and we achieve by solving problems and coming up with innovations. Bank on that and use as much of that as you can to feed into people's egos.
The other thing that struck me when Kenneth was talking, the other reason why you tap into those networks is a situation that everyone on this panel is in one way or another a unicorn, and most of the people who are listening to this are in one way or another unicorns, which means in your daily life, you don't have a lot of people you can go to with these types of problems, because you're actually like the best thing in their life. They're all looking up to you. And so if you either be like, I'm frustrated, I can't figure out how to connect with this company or get this investor, or you can't do that in most of your world. When you plug into, I had a client call me the other day, I just listened because he was like, that's what he was doing. And I realized he was doing it. I just let him talk. An African-American man who's a, general counsel at a company, and he was letting it out. That's the other reason to create those networks, because on your journey, you're going to have moments where you're just frustrated. And if you don't have some place to talk to people about this issue, that's what's going to probably break you. And so if you start working these networks with people who are similarly situated, you can always will inadvertently become support system for each other, and it will actually inure to the greater success of the whole community, because you'll be solving problems together, right? You'll be able to be like, well, what I did, and that's just a piece of nobody, well, what I did, and together you may actually have the solution. Or maybe you have to bring a third person in, but that's the other benefit of these communities that you need to do. Just not there's only connections, but also the support system. And you're going to need it on this journey.
You know what's interesting about this, and this, in my mind anyways, ties together in a necessary way, but not all startups, or I shouldn't say startups, but founders of color think about it this way. We talked about regional forums, we talked about networks and going on to do things that would allow you to make those relationships. And then we're talking about support systems of others that may look like you that have found success. Those need not be mutually exclusive. And what I mean by that is there are not that many people in positions like those that Cynthia, Robert, and Ken are holding today, or that Rossi or I are holding today. And having known the struggles it took to get to those positions in the first place, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how often a response is received to messages that are, it could be an introduction, it could be business related, it could be personal, it could be just, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about your journey. And that's another way to start a conversation. I think it should be one that's sincere, because people can read through that pretty quickly. And I think I almost got assaulted when I said this to someone recently, because of how hard it still is to grow a business when your founding team sort of doesn't have the background and the family history and everything else. And I said, I think it's it's like maybe a hair easier today to progress based on what I saw. And maybe Robert, you'd say that to me on my journey. And that in no way is meant to minimize the struggles and the stress and the efforts that will be required. It's merely a function of the fact that we have companies like Kimberly-Clark, ExxonMobil, BP that are actively engaging in boardrooms that don't look like this, in conversation about, hey, why are we not more diverse? Why are we not investing in more diverse companies? Why aren't we partnering with more diverse partners? And I find that encouraging. I know it's also frustrating for many who have heard those conversations for decades, but it does feel like there's a little more momentum, to me anyways.
I agree. It is frustrating, and there is more momentum. And some of the issue is like we're fatigued and we're tired. Those of us who've been like doing this for a while,
Right.
So it's important for us to remember. Okay, but we are having. I decided a long time ago that the success that I wanted to see for my community wasn't going to happen in my lifetime, and I was just putting bricks on the wall. And if you understand that, you don't measure your success by the fact that the wall is done. You measure success by the fact that there are more bricks on the wall, and that you're getting more efficient in putting those bricks down, and that you're helping more people figure out how to put bricks down. And I think some of the issue for us sometimes, and I said it about my parents' generation, like, much respect, my mom's 80th birthday is today. They thought they had won. When they put their bodies on the line at lunch counters, they thought they had won. And they thought that my generation, all we need to do is get an education and things would be better for us. So now we have all these highly educated people on this panel who are listening in, and we're like, oh, we haven't won. And we still got a whole lot more work to do, and we're putting our bodies and our minds on the line in other ways. But you know what? Now we know what it's about. Just what we needed to is put more bricks on the wall and train those behind us, our children, our mentees, to put more bricks on the wall.
It's a very eloquent and sad, yet true, I think, statement. I think there's Kenneth, I think I caught you in mid-word there.
I was reacting to your side, because actually I thought it was really empowering.
It is. I mean, it's just
we maybe live in a sad situation.
Right. Yeah, you're always hoping for but I love that about it, right? You're not going to feel this sense of, like, oh, I haven't accomplished something because the end zone doesn't need to be here. It's sort of like this is a longer journey, and you've played your part in that journey, is what I found so eloquent about the statement.
Absolutely. And I think that's, what I find encouraging about this entire conference, but also about all of these startups that are burgeoning from these Black academics, is these are bricks that we're going to go put in the wall. We're going to make it better. We're going, for all of the struggles that our parents and grandparents and generations before have faced, we're here, and we're going to make huge strides forward. I'm excited about that.
That's great. I will take guidance here from Dawn, who put a message in the chat room saying at 4:15 there is a session, and I see it on our calendar as well, called Moving Forward. It's going to be a roundtable discussion with the focus is this conversation. What are the bricks? How do you put them on the wall? So with that, I think let's move to the Q&A session of our panel discussion here. I see in the Q&A tab there are some questions already awaiting us, and some comments. Rossi, I think you really hit a mark with a lot of us, not only on the panel but also those listening, in terms of how you summarized the current experience. So that was great. This is being recorded, Rossi, so good. Maybe we can make it go viral. In terms of the questions here, if you have a question, let me just say this for those who are asking them. We've got a few minutes here for questions. If there's a question that you want to direct to someone in particular, please just put that in the question itself. So just looking here, I love when they come from anonymous attendees. So let's start with the anonymous one. What makes for a good partnership? When a partnership sours, what are the usual reasons? Anonymous is asking for a friend. Cynthia, what do you think? What happens? It was great meeting, everything. All of a sudden, you're not so hot on this partnership. What are some reasons that could happen?
There could be several reasons for it, and the startup shouldn't take it personally necessarily, because it could be internal to the organization that they met with. Things have changed. The focus has shifted slightly. Budget cuts could be occurring that could lead to the conversation not furthering. So I would say that could be something as well. So keep that in mind. But when things have gone well and we have engaged, I think a lack of transparency and communication is one of the real reasons why things can sour. Conducting technical due diligence and not following through, or being able to determine that the technology isn't what it's really presenting. Thermodynamics is your friend. Let's not defy it, and type of thing. Those are just showstoppers that usually kill the conversation or just the interest there. I would say those are probably the largest things.
Yeah,
I might add in cultural fit. So as Cynthia was mentioning, answering questions, the timeliness of answering questions might also matter, right? Some companies might want you to get back to them right away, really fast, because they have a fast-paced culture. Others may want you to be more introspective and thoughtful about how you respond. So you also have to figure out, how do I fit within the culture and the values of my partner?
Yeah, it's Rossi's head and mine. We're both going like this very quickly when you mention communication breakdowns, because that's probably the easiest to avoid. Culture is a little bit difficult to avoid. Diligence, if ultimately there's not a fit, there's not a fit. When there is a good fit and the company goes sour, the relationship goes sour, the company's not as hot on the startup because you just weren't keeping them updated on what progress you had made. You weren't keeping to the agenda and the schedule that you generally would collectively put that together. That's, I think, that's an easily avoidable mistake from the startup perspective, and we should take strides to avoid it as best we can. Let me jump to the next question here. What are the best venues for startups and corporates to meet each other? How do corporates find relevant startups, and how do startups find relevant corporates that will make good partners? I think we've discussed this. Again, some of these questions came in earlier on before we hit on some of these topics. So I'll dismiss that one as one that we have spent adequate time discussing here.
Can
Wonderful.
I add something, Dinesh?
Please do.
So oftentimes corporations will go through a process where they have a request for a proposal. Be on the lookout for those and apply to those. You may not get the first several that you apply to, but you can ask for feedback. Ask why you weren't moved to the next round. I think that's something people don't usually may know about or actually use when they're very, as a very early startup.
feedback, that's a great point. And I think it goes to this question from Spencer, where, key relationships that can help in connecting with corporate strategic partners. Little twist on that. You already have the relationship, or you have a foot in because you've come through the, the broader RFP process. Get that feedback. If it's not, if you don't progress, you'll at least hear from somebody as to why, and it'll allow you to fine tune the response the next time you are in the position to provide, a response to the company. We have a question for Mr. Long. Some major corps want to protect their IP and will not partner with anyone if it means they don't have total control of the IP. How do you suggest an entrepreneur structure their relationship to accommodate that?
Tricky. I mean, sometimes you're put in a position where you see it on Shark Tank all the time. Do you want the full potential or something or nothing?
Right.
Nothing is not a good outcome. So full potential, you want to get as close as you can to that. And what I would say for startups is try to build contingencies into contracts. If I dream about the big pie, how much of that should be in the base terms versus incentivized incremental value as we get to that higher threshold. So how do you sort of get that foot in the door, maybe give away a lot for a little, but if you achieve a lot, you get a lot.
Yeah.
You
And
are
I
the
think
deal
that's,
makers. I'm an engineer.
I was going to say, the devil's in the details on that one. And while the question was addressed to you, Robert, I think it makes sense for the lawyers to chime in on that one. IP is a pretty complicated relationship, and there are different ways to skin that cat, as they say. You can have it can split away. You can set up a joint venture. It can get complicated, and I don't think a deal would die because we couldn't figure out what to do with the IP if otherwise the parties were amenable to putting something together and wanted to do something together. There's an interesting question here that we have not touched on. I'll open it to the panelists if you have thoughts based on your own experiences. What can academic institutions do to help?
So I'll start there. Academic institutions have various different relationships with with corporations. I think of some of my own interactions at Princeton University, for instance. I'm a recruiter for Princeton University, so I lead our recruiting team. So I'm finding students, and I'm in all of that. I'm talking to professors. I'm talking to people at career services, talking to deans. Princeton University has a relationship with ExxonMobil through the Andlinger Center for Energy. So we're having interactions there and trading and sharing research knowledge with each other. So with these relations, and not to mention just professors have relationships with various researchers at the company. Each of those creates a connection point, and there's synergistic reasons why we want those relationships to continue, and trust points that are already built in. You can leverage those trust points that the university has already built for you to get your foot in the door in a way that maybe you couldn't with a cold call or a LinkedIn IM.
That's great. It's amazing how quickly time flies. We are out of time. Thank you so much, Cynthia, Robert, Rossi, Ken, for engaging in these open and sort of vulnerable conversations. Rossi, I think your words about building, with bricks and being content in the fact that you're part of the road that's being built, irrespective of how long that road takes to build, are going to rest with many people for a long time. Don, I'd like to bring you back up to continue with the next session.
And I echo Dinesh's thanks to the four panelists and my personal thanks to Dinesh as well. Our next session starts in 5 minutes. Hope to see everyone at that time. Thank you.